Hey everybody, this is In Philosopher's Garb. I'm a Christian theologian, and like everybody else on your YouTube feed right now, I want to talk about Charlie Kirk. Actually, more specifically, I want to talk about all the other Christians who have been talking about Charlie Kirk recently and his death, and I want to respond to them and in many ways critique them, which if you're familiar with this channel, shouldn't come as a big surprise to you. I've seen at least, I think, 5 or 6 big Christian YouTubers put out content in the last few days related to this topic. These have ranged from short, less than 10-minute videos to live streams that go on for like over an hour. And some of these live streams, like the one recently done by Big John Steele and Than, were careful, rational, and well done. Seriously, kudos to you guys on that. Others, such as the one put out by David Wood and Mike Jones of Inspiring Philosophy, I thought were sloppy, ignorant, and really just emotional reactions that are going to provoke political tensions. Even in the responses that I was pleasantly surprised with, I sometimes found things that I was like, I want to address that. So let's go ahead and get going. I want to begin by saying what should be obvious, but unfortunately isn't. Charlie Kirk was murdered. This was an evil act that everybody should condemn, and we should not celebrate it. No matter how much you disagree with Kirk, and no matter how much you dislike what he said, nothing that he has ever said warranted this attack. Nothing justifies it, and nothing justifies celebrating his death. And I'm saying that as somebody who very much did not like what Kirk had to say. At no point in this video should I ever be interpreted as approving of the attack on Kirk or approving of celebrating it or anything along those lines. Much like many of you, I have prayed for both Kirk and his family in the aftermath of this attack. Now, in the aftermath of this attack, there have been many people celebrating Kirk's death online, and as I've said, this is wrong. However, there have also been a surge of people responding to Kirk's death with hasty declarations of war on the left. These are hasty generalizations and rhetoric about how the left did this. There is some suggestion that all Democrats or all of the left is somehow responsible for this attack, and this rhetoric is escalating quite quickly. I have seen Facebook posts explicitly stating that this isn't just one assassin, but it's on the entire left, and the entire left bears responsibility. I've seen unhinged Facebook posts saying that, the left is our enemy who's out to destroy us, yada, yada, yada. And I want to begin by addressing this rhetoric because it's dangerous. Put simply, this is stupid. First, this is stupid because at the time in which these posts were made, we knew nothing or almost nothing about the shooter. Now, as I am recording this right now, we still don't know a whole lot. There's some information that's been coming out about him and his background, stuff like that. Obviously, it seems like he doesn't like Charlie Kirk. But even if the shooter is as left as you can get, that does not mean that he is a representative of an entire political party. I'm a left-leaning person. I've been public about voting for Kamala Harris in the past, and I still stand by that decision. I do not approve of these actions, even from left-wing comedians and talk show hosts that make a living poking fun at politicians. I have seen calm, sober statements condemning these actions. I've seen politicians on the left being quick to condemn these actions and call for unity. This idea that there are two sides. One side is the right, one side is the left, and anything one person does on the left is somehow a representative of the whole is asinine. Unfortunately, this type of language is being used even among popular Christian influencers. Shortly after the assassination, David Wood and Mike Jones of Inspiring Philosophy did a live stream about an hour and a half long in which they responded and gave their thoughts and stuff like this. And they used this type of language. Here are some clips from that live stream.
Any way the left has painted him, he loved his family. It was very obvious. He loved what he did, and he cared about what he was doing, and he believed in what he was doing. And they shot him for that. Because when they couldn't defeat him with words, they picked up guns like animals.
One side said, no, you don't get to do that. We will kill you. We will kill you. So we're just back to killing people over disagreements, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we are.
I've been told for, decades, or at least a decade by Hollywood and the media, that the radical right, the far right, is the problem. And it just seems like they're the ones that are always going out on doing all sorts of crazy stuff like this. And what does the other side do? We need to shoot him. And they prove his point. Who is the more mature side? Who is the side that cares about protecting the innocent and preventing war? And again, we see so much violence coming from the left. It's insane at this point. I mean,
he'll be rendered speechless by your powerful argument, and you're instantly viral. You're the instant hero of the left. And no, we're not going to do that. Someone's got to shoot him instead.
Well, I mean, they tried to kill Trump last year. I mean,
So in this video, we see Mike repeatedly attributing these actions to the left. And to be fair, Mike later in the live stream makes a comment about how, well, he knows not everybody on the left supports this. However, Mike, a few sprinkled comments such as these do not negate the consistent language and tone and attitude that you bring throughout this entire live stream, in which you quite clearly act as if the left as a whole is responsible for this. Now, Mike additionally makes remarks that seem to indicate that such violent actions primarily come from the left and that it's really the right who cares about people. This comment is insanely ignorant, and since Mike, I guess, seems to live in a right-wing echo chamber, allow me to offer some outside perspective. Earlier this year, Melissa Hortman, a Democratic representative in Minnesota, was murdered along with her husband Mark. That same day, John Hoffman, a Democrat who is a member of the Minnesota State Senate, was also attacked along with his wife. Now, luckily, Hoffman and his wife survived. Now, the attacker in these instances is clearly political. This is a political attack. The attacker's name was Vance Luther Bolter. I'm not 100% sure that I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and I don't really care if I pronounce his name correctly. So Bolter was an evangelical who had a history of anti-abortion and anti-transgender statements. He also voted for Donald Trump. Or to use Mike language, he was from your side. Now, I know you probably want to object at that type of language and say, no, he actually isn't on your side. You're probably going to take issue with that language. And guess what? If you feel that way, you're starting to get my point. Now, this was not the only violent political attack carried out against a Democrat in recent years. Nancy Pelosi, a very well-known Democratic politician, had her home broken into and her husband assaulted with a hammer. That fractured his skull and put him in the hospital. The assailant was looking for Nancy Pelosi, but attacked her husband Paul when he couldn't find her. Now, the assailant in that Depop, again, don't really care about his last name, had a history of consuming and sharing right-wing content and conspiracy theories. So 2 questions I want to ask at this point. First, if I got up and I said that the right was responsible for these actions, would you think that was appropriate language? Would you think that was me being careful? Would you think it would be appropriate for me to say that your side is responsible for such attacks? Would I be justified in declaring war on the entire right based on the actions of these individuals? Of course not. But apparently some Christians and Republicans conveniently forget about, not doing to others as you would have them do unto you, things like that, the golden rule. But there's a second, more important question I want to ask Mike, David, and all my viewers. Many of you are upset, visibly, understandably upset by the vile, evil assault on Charlie Kirk. You're angry, and that's understandable. Where was your anger when Melissa Hortman was murdered in her home with her husband? Where was your anger when Paul Pelosi was beaten with a hammer? Mike, you and David spent a good portion of your live stream scrolling through random posts on the internet and bashing the people that were cheering on this attack. However, with the attacks on Democrats that I mentioned, there were all types of unhinged right-wing conspiracy theories and inappropriate comments. So for instance, with the attack on Paul Pelosi, there was stories spread about how Pelosi was involved with male prostitutes or that they were lovers. Some went so far as to say the whole thing was staged. There were also all types of vile memes and mockery. So Donald Trump Jr. posted a picture of a hammer saying that he had Paul Pelosi's Halloween costume ready. And here are some posts on Twitter following the attack. So here we see Dinesh D'Souza, a very well-known, prominent right-wing spokesperson, saying the left is going crazy because not only are we not buying the wacky, implausible Paul Pelosi story, but we are even laughing over how ridiculous it is, going on to comment about fake pieties and breaking their control over us. And again, below that, we see a meme being posted about Nancy Pelosi and her husband, along with what looks to be like a male prostitute or stripper holding a hammer, clearly seeming to draw from the conspiracy theories about this being a lover of Pelosi or her husband or something like that. There are other instances of this. So for instance, we have this meme posted by this gentleman's maybe a stretch there. It was Nancy in the dining room with a hammer too early, insinuating that Nancy did this to her husband. Here we see a commenter saying, I guess it was finally hammer time. Okay, so mocking, making light. Here we see a commenter say, I have always laughed at them. Now Twitter allows me to, and they are harmless tyrants. Again, we need to give Paul a hug. He had been trapped in a long, sexless marriage and enjoys the company of younger men. He is in deep love, enough to quarrel with his young lover in his underpants. These are the comments that people were posting about the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband. So, where was your anger when this happened? Where was your hurt? Where was your outrage? Where was the hour-and-a-half stream where you made sweeping statements about the right? Why didn't you scroll through all the nasty posts then and critique them then? Was it because in those situations the violent actions were not committed against people who were on your side? Was it that then it wasn't your friends being attacked, or was it because you didn't even know about it? And if you're just now learning about these violent political attacks against sitting Democratic legislators, isn't that evidence that you're potentially living in a right-wing echo chamber? Now, when confronted with these examples, I think most rational people will recognize that taking the actions of a lone actor and making them representative of an entire half of the political spectrum is silly. However, there are nonetheless people on the right who, when faced with these facts, will still double down on their demonization of the left based on the assassination of Charlie Kirk. A good example of this is Will Hess. Now, Will Hess is a well-known Christian YouTuber and author, and recently I commented on an unhinged Facebook post, which was using Kirk's death to make insane generalizations about the left. When I did so, Will Hess hopped in and said, oh, well, these are instances of violence that are different. These aren't comparable. Here is his response. We can read it together. So here we see Will Hess say, James Agnew, that's me, two major differences. One, the left has been violent toward the right for years. Two, the horrific event with the Hortmans is condemnable. People aren't celebrating and dancing on their graves, proving that this is not apples to apples. Then Will has posted a little meme, because this is how you win arguments these days. Here we see a meme saying that I'm essentially this guy saying, see both sides, there is literally no difference between them, with the implication being that on the side on the left, side A, those are instances of political violence from the right, and side B is political violence from the left. And look at me, I'm there in the middle being so stupid and saying that they're essentially the same. And I appreciate Hess posting this, as I was already working on my script for this video, because it gives me a great example of how many right-wing conservatives are overconfident and undereducated on political topics. So let's look at the claims made by Hess and see how they hold up to reality. Let's start by looking at this claim that there is not a long-standing history of violence from the right. This is false. So in the original post that Hess was responding to, I had mentioned Melissa Hortman, which was recent, but as already noted, there was Nancy Pelosi's husband. He was the subject of a political attack from the right, far right. There are many more examples. In 2020, right-wing Trump supporters violently attacked our nation's capital. In doing so, they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and hunted for legislators. Some of them had zip ties. Several police officers were injured throughout this attack. I believe one died. In 2017, in Charlottesville, there was a group of people protesting a Unite the Right rally. A Trump supporter drove his car into the group of protesters who were protesting that Unite the Right rally. That resulted in the death of a woman. In 2019, a 21-year-old Republican and Trump supporter engaged in a mass shooting at an El Paso Walmart. This shooting was specifically focused on killing Latinos. In his manifesto, the shooter expressed the far-right conspiracy theory known as the Great Replacement theory. We'll come back to that conspiracy theory in a bit. This shooter's manifesto used rhetoric similar to that of Trump, talking about an invasion of immigrants and how the growth of Hispanics was going to result in Democrats gaining control of the U.S., so on and so forth. In 2018, 16 explosives were mailed to various Democratic politicians and critics of Trump. The perpetrator of that was an avid watcher of Fox News, and he believed that Democrats were actively working to hurt him. Luckily, this was foiled. This kind of mass attempt at political assassination was foiled by the authorities, but he nonetheless attempted it. So no, Will, there is a long history of violence from the far right. This is not an isolated incident. Now, I'm pretty confident that no matter how many examples I give, Will is just going to point to his meme and say, well, there are more left-wing violent attacks than there are right-wing violent attacks. And so to address this meme, because that's what arguments have come to these days, we need to not just cite specific instances, we need comprehensive studies on these type of attacks, right? We need to look at these as a whole, and only after doing that can we see whether or not the far right or far left produces more types of violence. And luckily, this has already been done. So the University of Maryland maintains the Global Terrorism Database, which, as its name suggests, is a massive project, which they describe as follows, quote, "The Global Terrorism Database is an open source database including information on terrorist events around the world from 1970 through 2020. Unlike many other event databases, the GTD includes a systematic data on domestic as well as transnational and international terrorist incidents that have occurred during this time period and now includes more than 200,000 cases. For each GTD incident, information is available on the data and location of the incident, the weapons used, and nature of the target, the number of casualties, and, when identifiable, the group or individual responsible." So there are a number of peer-reviewed studies that have been done based on this data set. One that is of interest to us is titled "A Comparison of Political Violence by Left-Wing, Right-Wing, and Islamist Extremists in the United States and the World." And as the title suggests, this study compared violence, which comes from left-wing groups and right-wing groups and Islamist extremists. And what they found is that violent attacks are more likely to come from the far right than from the left. They state in their abstract, quote, "In this research, we address these gaps by comparing the use of political violence by left-wing, right-wing, and Islamist extremists in the United States and worldwide using two unique data sets that cover real-world examples of politically motivated violent behaviors. Across both data sets, we find that radical acts perpetrated by individuals associated with left-wing causes are less likely to be violent. In the United States, we find no difference between the level of violence perpetrated by right-wing and Islamist extremists. However, differences in violence emerge on the global level, with Islamist extremists being more likely than right-wing extremists to engage in more violent acts." Later in their paper, they state, "Our results are in line with past research showing that conservative ideology represented in our dataset by both right-wing and Islamist causes is positively related to violent political behavior. These results support the view that left-wing and right-wing extremists are not equivalent when it comes to the use of violence. Whereas our findings are not inconsistent with the idea that individuals espousing different ideologies may feel equally negative toward worldview threatening others, they suggest that the social consequences of extreme right-wing hostility may be more harmful than those caused by the left." Now, this is consistent with other works in the literature surrounding this area. So this study also found that, quote, "Results indicate over the past 3 decades the overall prevalence and deadliness of far-right extremism far outweighs that of the far left, even though far-left violence has increased over the last 5 years." So it seems like Will Hess has put me on the wrong side of this little meme. Now, some of you are probably hearing this and thinking, that's crazy. That's nonsense. You hear so many stories about violence from the left, wing, but you don't hear it from the right. I want to invite you to entertain the possibility that you live in an echo chamber of propaganda in which anytime anything done by the left that is wrong, any violent act done by them, that is amplified and it's played on repeat and it's really burned into your skull. And when similar attacks happen by people from the right, they either don't get talked about or they get downplayed or they get made fun of, or conspiracy theories get spun about how, oh, it's really the Democrats who did it, or really Pelosi had this gay lover, or whatever nonsense people like Dinesh D'Souza spin. And this is why many of you are going to lose your mind when hearing those statistics. But I brought the receipts. Now, Will Hess is an easy target for this video. There are a lot of people regurgitating these same talking points. And I spend time on this because it's important. This type of rash generalization is just going to cause more political unrest and polarization in this country. It's not helpful, it's harmful, and it's hypocritical. I want to come to this hypocritical part because I have seen several people try to blame the assassination of Charlie Kirk on the language that people on the left have used to describe. So, for instance, Will Hess himself makes this claim in one of his videos that he posted recently, saying this idea of, okay, well, listen, if you call people on the right Hitler, if you call them Nazis, then, you know, that is going to somehow instigate or cause this type of attack.
Because this is what happens when you label your opposition as Nazis, as fascists, as people who are less than human, subhuman, evil, and tyrannical beings. This is what happens. Husbands and fathers die because somebody's going to start taking that rhetoric, not as political rhetoric, but as real.
So Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has called Democrats the enemy from within and has stated that they are more dangerous than any foreign adversary. Donald Trump has repeatedly referred to Democrats as a danger to the nation and as our enemies and all the type of rhetoric that you're condemning here. Donald Trump has called immigrants animals who are not human. So by your own logic, the right is actively instigating the acts of political violence through their rhetoric. Come on, Will, be consistent here. If you're going to say that people like Elizabeth Warren instigated these type of attacks and have some degree of blame because they called Trump a Nazi or because they called Republicans Nazis or whatever, then by that same logic, when Republicans, including the Republican who's the president at the moment, when he gets up and he demonizes Democrats, and when he calls immigrants animals who are inhuman, then according to your logic, they bear blame for the violent acts of terror that are committed against immigrants, that are committed against Democrats, so on and so forth. I'm begging you to be consistent here. Anytime a person gets up and they say, the left is out to destroy us, they're our enemy, they're the enemy within, all these things that Republicans have been spouting for a while now, according to you, that causes or is causally linked to all of the instances of right-wing crime, right? So this is the first level, this is hypocritical. But this is actually going to come back and bite you and everybody else in the butt in a way that's way more significant and relevant to the Charlie Kirk stuff. But I'm going to save that. We're going to put a pin in the hypocrisy of Will and Republicans. This whole idea of, oh, well, if you call someone a Nazi, if you say they're an enemy of our country, then, you know, you caused all this. The hypocrisy of that, we're going to put a pin in that. And we're going to revisit this later in this video because there's some data that needs to get on the table before we can really see the full hypocrisy of guys like Will. So let's go ahead and go on to the next point here. As I've watched through some of these reaction videos, I've seen people who are my friends, such as Big John Steele and Than, express their anger towards the comments that are cheering on the death of Charlie Kirk. In the live stream that Big John and Than did, which was, again, I think quite tasteful and careful, and I applaud them for how they handle these topics, I remember hearing, I think it was Than say, that as he read through the comments mocking Kirk's death, he felt himself getting angry. He felt the unchristian pull towards wanting to lash out. I think Big John Steele might have said something about wanting to tell people to like eat shit or something like that. I may be misremembering that. If I am, forgive me, guys. But the point is, they recognize that those feelings were not Christian feelings, and so they censored them in light of the teachings of Christ. Now, what I want to do is I want to hone in on that for a second, right? John, Than, Mike, David, Trent, Gavin, Will, all the people who are watching, I want you to think about the anger and the disgust that you feel when you see the vile remarks made about Kirk's death in the last few days. I want you to bring that emotion to your attention. Don't approve of it. No, we're not going to approve of it. I just want you to be aware of it and reflect on it. That feeling, that anger that you have, that hurt, that disgust you feel to seeing those comments, that is the same feeling that Charlie Kirk made other people feel for a living. Charlie Kirk made vile, hateful, racist remarks on the internet for a living. It was his career. He stoked racial and political tensions that have caused a lot of harm. Let me give you some examples. A few minutes ago, I mentioned how the husband of Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, was attacked in their home. I asked why none of these Christian content creators commented on that attack, but actually there was one Christian content creator who did talk about that attack, and this is what he said.
And why is he still in jail? Why has he not been bailed out? By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like 30 or 40,000 bucks. Bail him out and then go ask him some questions.
So that is Charlie Kirk saying that the man who violently assaulted the spouse of a Democratic lawmaker should be bailed out of prison, and that to bail him out would be a heroic and patriotic act. He's laughing while he says it. This seems pretty similar to the type of things being said about Kirk online that is getting all of you so angry and riled up. I want you to imagine how you would feel if you were a friend of Paul Pelosi and you heard some guy on the internet saying that it would be a patriotic act to bail out the man who assaulted your friend or your father or your husband or your coworker. Think about how that would make you feel. Wouldn't that probably be the same type of feeling that you have when you read the vile comments cheering on Kirk's death? Let's look at another example.
Thing. The least important thing for women who voted for Harris is having children. Alex Marlow, what explains this? Why do so many Democrat women want to die alone? This goes to show why liberal women are so unhappy, why so many liberal women are on antidepressants, why so many liberal women are just neurotic and just so unattractive to young men. Because their number one thing is fulfilling job and career, then having the money to do things you want, having emotional stability. This hyper narcissistic. Liberal women inherently are incredibly narcissistic.
So Kirk just accused liberal women of wanting to die alone because most liberal women didn't define success by popping out babies. Now, that doesn't even remotely follow. Whether or not you define success in your life by having babies does not mean that you want to die alone. But Kirk, in his usual hateful manner, continues to attack these women and say that they are narcissists, they are neurotic, they are unattractive. Why? Because on a poll where women had to select 3 things that they prioritized most liberal women didn't choose having kids. Not only is this immensely stupid and hateful, it's unbiblical. Guess what, everybody? Paul explicitly says in the New Testament, it is better to remain unmarried. Paul would not have defined his success in life by the kids that he had. So I guess according to Kirk, Paul was also a narcissist. Imagine that you are a woman who doesn't want to have kids, but you spend your time volunteering or working in a ministry or creating community, and Charlie Kirk tells you that you are unattractive, neurotic narcissist because you decided that you would rather focus on other things than child rearing. And you know, like how Paul talks about focusing on other things besides marriage, that whole thing. Imagine how you would feel as a woman hearing that. Imagine how you would feel as a man hearing somebody insult your wife like that. Let's go to the next example. This comes from a conversation that Kirk had on a college campus about rape.
The point is that it's so materially insane to think that 1 in 5 American women will be raped in their life.
It is. I agree.
No, meaning that they're lying about being raped, that they're lying about being sexually assaulted.
You believe that people lie about being sexually... See,
all
this is
the
actually,
time.
this feeds into what I was
all
saying.
the time.
This is...
So let's begin by getting a few things straight here, right? There's a mountain of literature researching sexual assault and its prevalence in our society. Multiple studies, surveys have been done, which indicate that on the lower end of the estimates, around there, roughly 1 in 5 women suffer from sexual assault. Charlie Kirk, in the face of that data, rejects it. He rejects all of the data, the well-researched analytic data about sexual assault in this country. And you know why he rejected it? In that video, he gave roughly 2 arguments. The first being that, well, that would be comparable to the number of rapes in some third world country, and it's just inconceivable to think that we have the same, percentage of rapes as a third world country, which is dumb. Whether or not our statistics about sexual assault correlate with the statistics of some other country that you want to feel superior to, that doesn't undercut the hard data that we have suggesting that those are the statistics that are the case in America. And his other argument is that, well, if so many women get raped at college, why do women still go to college? QED, infallible logic. This is also stupid because a lot of women may not know about the statistics in question, or they may feel like it won't happen to them, or maybe they feel like the risk is worth it because they want an education to better their lives. The point is, Charlie Kirk made a blanket statement about rape victims being liars. He didn't base this statement on any studies, any alternative surveys, anything. He just asserted it because he couldn't fathom the idea that the great USA would have the same rape rates as a third world country. This is disgusting and despicable. Imagine that you are a woman who has been raped, or imagine your wife or your daughter has been raped, and you have seen the trauma that has created in their life, and you hear Charlie Kirk saying, no, they're just lying. He's encouraging young men to, when they are faced with, reports of sexual assault, to just when they lie about that stuff, right? They're just making it up, all because he apparently wants to feel superior to a third world country. Imagine the anger and the disgust that would cause you to feel. Imagine the effect that this has on society when Kirk, who is an influential guy with many young men, he goes out and he encourages them to accuse rape victims of lying. Let's look at another example.
In fact, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own.
If you listen to that clip and you, as a Christian, do not recoil in disgust, there is something wrong with you. This is a white man mocking several black women, essentially calling them stupid, accusing them of stealing white people's jobs, and making fun of one of these women because she briefly stumbled over her words while giving a public lecture. Affirmative action helps people who historically have been discriminated against so that they can have the same opportunities as others. This woman recognized that she was able to have her career because affirmative action gave her opportunities that she might not have had because of her race and gender. She recognized that she was helped by these type of programs and these type of policies, and she wants to help continue that help and offer it to others. And Kirk's response is to mock her, call her stupid. This is evil. Seriously, how Kirk acts in this video, this is evil. And if you won't call this evil, you are a hypocrite. If you're a Republican, if you're a Christian, and you get up and you bash people on the left and you won't look at what Kirk says here and call this evil, shame on you. Seriously, this is not how Christians should act. Let's look at another example.
about that.
Well, George Floyd didn't die because of the police officer. He died largely because of a drug overdose.
But he had his knee on his neck. And we
Yeah.
all saw the video.
But the knee on the neck is actually an approved police technique that police departments taught Derek Chauvin to use. Do you know that George Floyd was saying, I couldn't breathe, well before that restraining technique? And
So why'd they use the technique if he already couldn't breathe?
Well, because he was actually resisting arrest. According to the medical examiner, he was drug overdosing in real time. That it wasn't because of the police officer, Derek Chauvin, that put his knee on the neck. Our whole country blew up because of this incident, and it was largely based on a lie.
So let's get all on the same page here. In 2020, George Floyd, a black man, was brutally killed by a police officer, Derek Chauvin. Chauvin, the police officer in question, was sentenced to roughly 22 years in prison for murder. And Kirk had suggested that the murderer should actually be pardoned. He should be set free. So that's what's going on in that video. So what Kirk has said in that video is plainly false and has been debunked. The medical examiner has said point blank that he considers this a homicide. Kirk took one statement from the medical examiner out of context. He ignored the rest of what he said, and then he spread misinformation about it, because by doing so, he was able to counteract an example of clear police brutality and racism in America, which Kirk's fragile worldview just could not handle. So AFP has a fact check available for this claim by Kirk that I suggest interested parties check out. So again, imagine that you are a friend or family member of Floyd, or maybe you're just a black man in America who you've experienced racism of this degree, or you've had it happen to friends and family, or maybe you just see the video of Floyd being murdered. You watch it. You watch the murderer convicted in a jury of his peers. And then you see Charlie Kirk saying that that murderer should be convicted because actually Floyd was just drugged up. Imagine how that would make you feel. While we are on, Kirk's language about African Americans, let's see some other things that Kirk has said on that topic.
Now, were they trying to hijack her? Were these blacks trying to go rob her? Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more.
So that was Kirk making a blanket statement about how prowling blacks are going around urban areas hunting whites. This clearly promotes racial stereotype and increases racial tensions. But Kirk is not content to just make racist, hateful remarks about black people. He's an equal opportunity racist. Let's see an example of that.
Everyone says, well, we just need immigrants to come legally. We just need immigrants to come legally. That's not true. Omar Fatah came here legally. Ilhan Omar came here legally. Rashida Tlaib, her parents came here legally. Zohran Mamdani came here legally. Here's another piece of tape. Now, this you might think, I want you to guess, actually. I'm going to play this piece of tape. Where is this? Is it Mogadishu? Is it Brussels? Is it Berlin? Is it Minneapolis? Let's play Guess the State. Guess the State here live on the Charlie Kirk Show. And I'm not allowed to say that this guy's not an American. I'm sorry, he's not an American. Play cut 393. That is in. Anybody? OHIO. How's that, Danny? Your state's doing great. That is an Ohio victory party for Islami Muhammad. Now, when we think of what it means to be an American, is someone by the name of Islami Muhammad? Yeah, I don't think so.
So in this clip, we have Kirk telling people that they are not real Americans because of their name and because of the language that they speak. Again, imagine how this might make a racial minority feel. Imagine how this might make immigrants feel, or those who are friends with immigrants, or those of us who just in general actually have a conscience. For my next example, I want to talk about the great replacement theory that I mentioned earlier. Put simply, the great replacement theory is a far-right conspiracy theory that is that there is some type of mass strategy. The idea is that there's some type of mass strategy or agenda to replace white people, or that there's a white genocide, and we're going to someone's trying to replace like white people and white culture with non-white people, maybe often immigrants from specific countries, things like that. This is supposedly done through immigration, birth rates, so on and so forth. This view doesn't just have a history in America, but also Europe as well. But for obvious reasons, I'm going to be focusing on America. This great replacement is supposedly done to gain control over the country or to kill white culture or whatever, things like that. It is a conspiracy theory. I'm sure if you ask 10 proponents of this idea, you might get 10 different answers on, who is behind it and their motives. But the general idea is there's a consecrated, malicious effort to get rid of white majority by the use of immigrants. Now, this great replacement theory has been a pretty big motivator in quite a few terrorist attacks in America in recent years. In 2018, there was a terrorist attack at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. This resulted in the death of 11 Jews who were present at the time. The shooter believed that the Jews were importing Muslims into the country in these migrant caravans to like destroy the country or something. In 2022, there was a shooting in Buffalo, New York, where 10 black people were killed. The shooter had a pretty big manifesto where he espoused the great replacement theory and had complaints about mass immigration, again orchestrated by the Jews. Put simply, the great replacement is an inherently racist, insane conspiracy theory which has stoked racism and hate in America towards immigrants and minorities. Charlie Kirk was an active proponent of the great replacement theory. He has said that it is not just a theory, it is reality. Let's look at some clips for that.
The great replacement strategy, which is well underway every single day on our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different. There's another story that seems to be unrelated, but it's exactly what's happening. Now, the southern border is, of course, the great replacement. They're trying to replace us demographically. They're trying to make the country less white. They're trying to make the country more like the third world. The dumping ground of the planet is the United States southern border. And the secret is out. The rapists, the thugs, the murderers, fighting age males, they're coming from across the world, from China, from Russia, from Middle Eastern countries. And they're coming in and they're coming in and they're coming in and they're coming in.
So let's start to bring this home. Charlie Kirk repeatedly on a wide range of issues said things that were vile, hateful, and dangerous. He used his massive platform to spread misinformation about a wide range of topics. And by the way, I've scratched the surface, just kind of barely scratched the surface on Kirk's misinformation and his hatred and the damage that he's done. Now, earlier, when we talked about the hypocrisy of Will Hess and all these other, Republicans and Christians who say, well, listen, if you call us Nazis, if you call us Hitler, well, then you're responsible for the death of Kirk because you can't just say these things about people and not expect it to be taken, to a violent end. Okay, guys, let's use your same logic. We saw that Charlie Kirk got up and he told people that white people, there was an active agenda to replace white people, and it was immigrants. They were sending all types of violent immigrants were being sent across the border, and they're being sent across the border to replace you, to eliminate you. He told his followers there are prowling gangs of blacks looking to hunt you white people. Okay, Hess. Okay, all you Christians, Republicans, follow your own logic. By your own logic, then, Charlie Kirk actively provoked the domestic terrorism that we talked about earlier in this video. If you're going to point at Democrats and say, when you call us Hitler, when you call us Nazis, when you say we're a danger to the country, that is causally linked, that leads to the death of Charlie Kirk. And by your same logic, when Charlie Kirk gets up and he says black people are stealing white people's jobs, you're being replaced by these immigrants who are being brought in for this type of, great replacement theory, and all these immigrants who come in and they're murderers, they're killers, they're rapists, they're all this stuff, then according to you, Will Hess, you shouldn't be surprised when we see people on the right who are ingesting this go out and commit these acts of terrorism, these right-wing acts of terrorism. Charlie Kirk has actively contributed to the violent actions of the extreme far right by your own standard. By your own standard, you very people who are getting up and defending this man and putting him on a status pedestal, by your own criteria, he should be condemned for these actions. And this is why I want to bring this to a close. So Charlie Kirk said things that should cause any rational, moral person to react in disgust and anger. Charlie Kirk has done a lot of harm to our political landscape through these type of remarks. And your disgust at the people who say hateful things about Kirk's death, I suspect it is very similar to the disgust that many people felt as a result of Kirk's career of spreading hate, misinformation, sexism, and racism. A major difference is that many of us, like myself, Than, John, when we start to feel that hatred rising in us, we censor it. We take that feeling, that disgust, and we submit it to the teaching of Christ. But there are many people in this country who don't have Christ's teaching to censor their hatred. And so that hatred grows to the point that they rejoice when they see Kirk killed, because in their mind, they see the death of Kirk as the death of an enemy combatant. And that is wrong. We should not rejoice over Kirk's death, and we should not approve of it no matter how much we disliked what he said. And I really disliked what he said. With that in mind, although I disapprove of these people celebrating Kirk's death, I sincerely understand where they are coming from. I understand why they look at it and they joke and they mock and they make like. I don't approve of it, but I sincerely understand it. And to say that I understand where they're coming from does not negate my condemnation. I think any intellectually honest person has to admit Kirk said things that were contemptible, vile, and evil. I don't think people hated Kirk because he was a Christian or because he was a Republican, at least not primarily those things. I think people hated Kirk because Kirk said the vile, heinous, unchristian things that I have shown you in this video. And because of the hate that these vile comments, provoked in them, they wrongfully celebrate Kirk's death. And with this in mind, I want to make a couple closing comments. First, if you want to applaud Kirk's advocacy on like a specific area, you want to say, hey, I like that, he was an advocate for the pro-life movement. Okay. If you want to applaud his efforts to get people to be Christian, okay. Don't idolize this man. Stop putting him on a pedestal. Stop sanitizing him. Stop acting like he is a role model. He is not. We should not want more people like Charlie Kirk in the church. We should not want that. We should want people who are far, far better than his racist, hateful, propagandist nonsense. Charlie Kirk made Christianity look worse. He is an embarrassment to Jesus Christ and everything that Christ stands for on a wide range of issues. I'm not going to say there's not any area where, Kirk doesn't get it right. Yeah, there's some areas he gets it right. He gets things right there. But overall, how he talks about other people, how he views other people, Kirk did not see Christ in other people. Kirk did not see Christ in the immigrant. Kirk did not see Christ in the black, House member or Congress member who was talking about her experiences when he called them stupid. Kirk doesn't see Christ in the people who are suffering from rape or suffering from all these things. All he sees, in my view, all he saw was the enemy. All he saw was liberals. And so he just channeled his hate towards them. The good that Kirk did, whatever it is, and however much it is, that does not mean you can ignore the bad. And guys, there was a lot of bad. And when you as a Christian, you get up and you make Kirk into a saint, despite all of what he has said and done to promote hate and misinformation in this country, you're making Christianity look really bad. The second point I want to make is this. C.S. Lewis has this great quote about how when the devil shoots his flaming arrows at us, he always does it in a pair. He does it in twos, so that while you are recoiling to get out of the way of one arrow, you might accidentally step into the other. And right now, I see many Christians who are so angered and hurt by the death of Kirk and by the celebration that it has caused online. They are stepping into the other arrow. They are stepping into the arrow, which will lead to them saying that every Democrat is their enemy who is set on destroying America and they have to be wiped out and yada, yada, yada. Rhetoric, which again, according to guys like Will Hess, that is rhetoric, which accordingly causally is connected to, instances of far-right crime, right? I'm just going to keep on hammering home the hypocrisy there. These Christians are letting their hate and disgust for what has happened to Kirk lead them, I think, down the same road as the people who let their hate for Kirk lead them to the dark places that we're now seeing. And I think a lot of them are doing it while sprinkling in the appropriate Christian language. It's like they know they're not supposed to say something, or they know they're supposed to say something as a Christian. And so they make these hasty generalizations. They make these remarks which in other contexts, if said about them, they would condemn. And then they turn around and I think maybe they sprinkle in comments about, we'll pray for them, and so on and so forth. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I'm wrong about this and maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there. But I just have this suspicion that underneath a lot of these comments is the growing cancer of hate that will ultimately lead them to the other side of the same coin that they are reacting against. And I'm confident that there are a lot of Christians who will never hear this message. The second I started critiquing Kirk, some of my viewers, you have already lost your mind and you have written me a dissertation in the comments. But I hope this will reach at least some of you and stop you from going down that bad path. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to roast me in the comments.